gentlemen, please silence your phones and hush your babies. The show is about to start. Hello, everyone, and thank you for choosing me over the Super Bowl today. I know that we're probably going to have lower numbers because the Baltimore Beavers or whoever is playing against someone else in a game that stops every 30 seconds. They can have a chat about what they want to do next. And now that I've thoroughly alienated all the American football fans, and they're definitely going to leave this stream, the rest of you are welcome to stay as we jump on the bandwagon of a very successful show that has won an Emmy or two, I believe, called Severance. And I wouldn't be talking about this alone, naturally. I have an accomplice in the form of Ruth Heath. Hello, Ruth.
Hi.
So Ruth's also a fan of the show, would that be fair to say?
Yes, big fan, and not as big a fan as some of my children. So I have been asking them for their opinions and instructed them to be in the live chat as well.
Yes. Okay. I've also been told that the it doesn't start for 3.5 hours, apparently.
Oh, there we go.
I don't know. Apparently, it's a big thing, though. Loads of people get together and have a day together. There's chicken wings involved, usually. So I have 3.5 hours before the game starts. And someone says the Beavers don't kick off until 6:30 Eastern time. Thank you very much, Northern Shrew. It was the Seattle Shrews they're playing, isn't it? I think the Baltimore Beavers and the Seattle Shrews are
great names.
It
sounds like an episode of a nature program instead. I was going to say 3.5 hours. We're not Mormon stories. We'll be done way before.
Yeah, you'd be lucky if you get half an hour out of us, really. But welcome everyone to a live stream about a show that really has a lot of Mormonism in it. Whether that was the intention of the creators, I don't think is clear. But certainly for someone that's grown up in the Mormon church, has experienced life in the Mormon church, you would be forgiven for seeing a lot of things that you recognize and feeling a lot of things watching this show. So yeah, let's have a talk about it. And I think it would be important for us to start by explaining kind of what the show is. Warning for anyone watching that hasn't watched the show and wants to, there will be spoilers. We'll try and keep the spoilers sort of light. We'll try and not hit on major plot points where we can. But, we're going to have to talk about what goes on in the show. So, Ruth, do you want to explain the severance procedure?
So the severance procedure is you're working for a big organization and you get to choose to have your outside personality completely unaware of what your inside the office space personality is doing, and vice versa. So when you're at work, you wake up at work, you get in the lift, and that's the start of your day. And as you get in the lift to leave, that's all you know. And then your outside personality just knows getting into the lift at the start of the day, that's when your day ends, in a sense. And as you get off the lift at the end of your day and you go home to your family and your home life, that's the existence that you know. So it's like your brain has been severed. There is two parts to your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's available on Apple TV Plus. It's in its second season right now. I believe it's been renewed for up to 4, so there's going to be plenty more of this going on, which is great. So yeah, essentially you arrive at work and then all your outside memories disappear and your in-work memories appear, and it's like you wake up at work, and it's like you then fall back asleep as you're leaving and you wake up and work again. So the innie, as they call it, the person that lives in work, constantly experiences work and never experiences the outside and can't bring anything in from the outside. Similarly, the outie just lives in a perpetual state of commuting and doing whatever people do in the evenings when they're not working. And the motivations for people to undergo this procedure are varied. But the reason I really wanted to talk about this in terms of Mormonism was I saw a post on Reddit that I wanted to quote here. So that's why Mormonism. On a metaphysical level, and I've linked the original author in the description, or those links will come up after the show. On a metaphysical level, severance challenges the concept of a unified continuous self. It aligns with theories like Derek Parfit's bundle theory, which views personal identity as a collection of memories and experiences rather than a fixed essence. Memory and continuity are shown to be central to our sense of self. These same philosophical questions can be applied to Mormon theology, particularly its planned happiness. The veil of forgetfulness is analogous to the severance procedure. It creates a new person in mortality, distinct from the individual who existed in the pre-existence. So just to sum that there, the idea of severance aligns with the idea of the premortal existence. Your outside self chose to go through a veil of forgetfulness so that the inside person or the mortal person, so the premortal and the mortal are split. We don't remember here what happened in the pre-existence, and essentially the version of us that existed in the pre-existence no longer exists because we can't remember it. It's not connected to us, which is to Parfit's idea. So the question then goes on, why create a probationary period for this new mortal persona rather than testing the original premortal self? Wasn't the war in heaven already a test? What's the purpose of making an innie suffer through life without consent? Again, the idea that the innies do not consent to being created, but a whole new person is born by the separation of these two parts of your brain. Furthermore, is it just or moral for the outie, premortal self, to bear eternal consequences for the innie's actions? Would you trust your innie to make eternal decisions on your behalf? How can someone be held eternally accountable for the finite actions of an entirely different person? This is just one of the many theological dilemmas within Mormonism and religion more broadly that challenges ideas of fairness, agency, and identity. So I thought that was really good, and I really appreciated getting to look at that. Ruth, what are your thoughts?
Well, for a start, I just feel so stupid because I never saw it in those terms when I was believing.
I didn't either.
In fact, I would argue that this is a great thing because we don't come with a preconceived notion about who we are and how important we are, and it'd make the test easy, wouldn't it, if we could come here with all of that knowledge? We'd just obviously would behave ourselves and do what we're supposed to do, but actually that is really key, that thing of why would I trust somebody else to tell me that that's what's happened before I'm here and waking up to my existence in this world, and believe them. And two, why would my other self, my outie self, trust this version of me to do what is right by them? Because it is like two different people entirely, isn't it?
And we see in the show, there is a point at which a character who is married on the outside starts to fall in love with someone at work. And that creates all sorts of moral dilemmas about, is he cheating on his wife, even if he doesn't know that his wife exists on the outside because he has no idea about his outside life? Great question. This brings up, True Blue Whale is the Reddit username. So credit to you, True Blue Whale, for that. But again, it challenges even. So, for example, when the innies suffer at work in the show, they're punished by the corporation. We can get into what those punishments look like. Being sent to the break room, forced to recite something over and over again to show their
compliance,
their compliance and their sorrow for what they've done wrong. It's like Jacob Hansen said in his debate with Alex O'Connor that suffering is justified because we chose it in the pre-existence, or an idea to that effect. The idea that Mormon theology gets past the idea of suffering because we chose it, or it might have been Hayden Carroll. I'm not sure which one of them said it, but that idea has certainly been floated. The idea, well, hang on, we chose this life, so we have no right to say we don't want it.
Yeah. So,
but actually,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
I was going to say, well, so in the show, you get, without being, giving spoilers, and certainly season 1, somebody literally tries to end themselves. One of the innies tries to end themselves. They're so unhappy. And they keep asking management to speak to their outie and say, please, can I get out of this? And being told, no, your outie wants you to stay in the program, wants you to stay in. And they literally try and kill themselves rather than go through this existence. And are so unhappy. But it's that whole thing of suffering, but you chose it, and you're still choosing it. That just feels horrendous, doesn't it? That's the story that we tell ourselves as members of the church as well.
And so to Parfit's point about the continuity of self, because you've severed that continuity of self between your pre-mortal existence and your earthly existence, the argument that, well, you chose it, well, the mortal version of you never did.
Yeah.
If you view it through that philosophical framework, then the mortal version of you never chose this. The mortal version of yourself did not consent to go through everything that we go through in mortality. And so that weakens that argument of a pre-existing decision to come to Earth and do those sorts of things. And go through what we go through.
Yeah. Can I just say that my husband started rugby chat in the live chat.
Good.
They're on this. It's the Six Nations. It's a little bit like the Super Bowl, except they don't wear any protective clothing, and they seem to bleed a lot more, and they don't spend as much time sitting out.
No. Anthony Campbell asked, has Italy ever won Six Nations? Doubtful.
Not as far as I'm aware, but they're doing really well this year.
Are they?
I mean, yeah, they beat Wales.
I've not had a chance to watch any of it yet. It's bad.
Fantastic. I mean, yeah. So anyway, we'll do another show about the Six Nations.
Yes, we'll stay on topic.
I think and we spoke about this a little bit ahead of time when we were talking about as wives and mothers, having children really young, and usually as Mormon families having big families, lots and lots of children, and that idea that we need to do that, we need to have kids because they need this mortal existence, they need to get a mortal body, tick that off the checklist, and it doesn't matter how dreadful a circumstance is. Someone put in the comments, it's that thing of you chose to come here to an abusive family, or you chose to come here to live in abject poverty or with dreadful ill health, or whatever it is, or your mother put her life on the line to have the umpteenth child, even though she knew it would make her dreadfully ill or mentally unwell or whatever. That all disappears once you don't believe in that framework. But certainly as members of the church, there is that added dimension to you. Not only chose that for yourself as the parent, but you are perpetuating that and choosing that for the children, and they've already chosen it as well. So it doesn't matter how horrendous the circumstances are that they're being born into, that's what they chose. They need to suck it up and get on with it.
And I want to just make a quick caveat before we move forward, which is that this is not Mormon exclusive. This is not us running around going, oh, Severance is a show about Mormonism, they've just made a show about the Mormons. They haven't. What we have here instead essentially is a show that draws upon, I'm sure, a lot of cults, a lot of cult tactics, and a lot of religious ideas and religious behaviors, and has kind of melded them into one. More philosophical ideas as well about the separation of self, about what it means to be a person, as Rickon would say, the you are, which Rickon as a character is everything I wish I could be in life, but I'm not, unfortunately, and I never will be as great as that man. Anyway, but it's not Mormon exclusive, so we're not running around going, oh great, they made a show about us. Very aware that there is Mormon parallels that can be drawn from this, and that's what we will do, having both been Mormon. One of us voluntarily no longer associated with the Mormon Church, one of us very much having been removed forcefully,
or severed,
which
we could say,
or severed from the Mormon Church, one could say also. Yes. Okay, so it's not Mormon exclusive, and it's not church bashing either. No. We've just discussed the idea of premortal existence without bashing the church, but we have talked about the philosophical and moral dilemmas that come with the idea of saying that people chose to exist in the way that we do exist, and that can be said without condemning the church. So, with that in mind, I want to start with some specifics about the show that I think we can get on with. So who is the founder of Lumen Industries, the fictional company that they work for in this show? Who's the founder, Ruth?
So you've got Kier, who is the founder, and they they mythologize who he is. They have pictures of him, paintings.
They quote him.
They quote from him. There's a museum to him. His childhood home is recreated. And I think as members, ex-members, former members, you can see some maybe analogies there. But yes, he's certainly mythologized and placed on a pedestal, literally, figurative. Yeah,
definitely. And they will quote him a lot, and like you said, there's a lot of him in, and they talk about singing to him. There's an anthem they sing to him, which is very much like praise to the man. In some ways.
And what I find interesting, there's a whole department that is there to create artwork for the company. Often artwork that memorializes events in the life of the founder. It would have been very easy to have photographs up, but no, they're going to create artwork. And again, I think we see some parallels there, whereby that artwork is done in a way which romanticizes, and we know how that works within the church as well.
And is there anything more Mormon than very specific pieces of approved artwork that must be hung in the buildings?
Yeah.
Right. You must draw from an approved catalogue of art.
Yeah.
To be put in your buildings. Well,
you can only use that artwork is prescribed with the lesson manual, isn't it?
Yeah.
Use this picture for this lesson, hold this picture up now at this point in the lesson. And then in recent times, we've had the artists being thrown under the bus by leadership for depicting things like the Urim and Thummim as opposed to a rock in a hat, because they should know better.
Again, I mean, we're just drawing parallels left, right, and centre. Was not the what are they called? O&D? Objects and Design? Yes. Were they not blamed for some uprising, some fictional uprising years ago that keeps the main team away from them?
Yeah.
Does the church not also blame its artists?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then they realized there was two versions of the same truth. I
wonder.
And people being kept from each other and sharing information that could actually help each other, because actually what it does is undermine the narrative that was being presented by management.
Yeah, Optics and Design coup, it was called. We have a fact checker in the chat, and I think actually I really like the name Optics and Design. Is the idea, again, the Mormon Church is very focused on its optics, about how it is perceived. So the idea that is the biggest department we see in the show, I think, with maybe exception of the goat people, that is the biggest department that we see. It's huge. It's a big industrial process, and it shows that at the heart of a lot of these companies, and particularly the Mormon Church, is optics.
Yeah.
So it's a very important group. The handbook again. I don't think you would go to an Anglican sermon, would you, Ruth, and hear them quote from the Anglican Handbook of Instructions?
No, you wouldn't. I imagine, but I don't know. Again, I don't want a Mormon bash, but as somebody who works in a industry where the compliance department is both very big and very important, and we disobey them at our peril. I love that the manual is called Compliance, and it's like a Bible. They read from it, they study it, they quote from it, they place it very carefully on a pedestal at one point. I think it's very interesting that book of rules is more important than anything else that they have.
And similarly, I think we're seeing in the modern church that the General Handbook of Instructions has become scripture. It's become something that guides the lives of members of the church far more than just how many paper towels to keep in the chapel. It's studied and picked apart, myself included. When I'm fighting the charge of apostasy, I'm looking through the handbook, because we're not appealing to scripture. We're not looking at what does scripture say about what is apostasy. That doesn't matter. It's about what does the handbook say? What does the church handbook say about who can do what, and who can stay and who can go? So I think the handbook being this significant in the show to the individuals and the devotees of the organization, I think draws strong parallels with the church. I have sat in sacrament meetings, people tell me in the chat, if you have as well, where people have quoted from the handbook. They've said the handbook of instructions teaches us. I'm sorry.
And from a faithful perspective, I kind of get that, because what they're saying is, by their sort of rationale, the Bible is confusing and lots of people have tinkered with it, and it's hard to interpret the words maybe. We have a living prophet, and he's sanctioned the compliance manual, the handbook, and it's updated bullet by bullet point as and when needed. So
every 6 months.
It's as fresh scripture as you can possibly hope for. How long before we actually just do away with the Bible and the Old Testament, New Testament, and the Book of Mormon, and just lean into the Big Red Book, because it's much fresher scripture, isn't it? Let's just go by the rule book.
It's like a slightly cowardly Doctrine and Covenants, I guess. They're not quite willing to create a new section of Doctrine and Covenants, but they will add things to the handbook. Yeah. And the things that get added and taken out of the handbook affect the lives of members of the church, arguably, again, more than the teachings of the scriptures do. At times, who can get baptized, who can't, where you can go to the toilet in the building.
Yeah.
Because I think what it does tell us actually is that the Bible and scripture, unless you're in an old, I'm going to phrase this well. So look at Judaism and Islam. Their scripture is very much not only a set of ideals to live by, but a set of rules to follow in your daily life. What you can eat, what you can't eat, etc. Christianity generally, as an idea, I would say, is more high-level concepts. How you live your life day to day. We're not going to stone you to death for mixed fabrics anymore. It's much higher level than that. Mormonism as a theological structure is more Judaistic or Islamic than it is sort of particularly Anglican Christianism or Protestant Christianism.
Yeah.
Christianity.
I think that's why a lot of other Christian faiths have an issue with calling Mormons Christians, to be honest, because it's not about, to them, it's not about, do you believe in Jesus? It's do you how you operate and and how you interpret those teachings as much as anything else.
And for Mormons, it's the inverse. It's very much, are you following the rules? Are you compliant?
Yeah.
Are you following things as set out in the handbook? Because that's the way I don't want to say you control people, but I guess that it is, right? That's the way you have maximum influence over people's lives. It's not just, okay, we want you to believe in certain high level topics. It's, we're going to govern which bathroom you can use. We're going to govern, when you can be baptized, by who. We're going to govern who can be involved in this thing and that thing. It's much more granular than other groups, I would say. So
in the show, I mean, what they're doing for a job, again, without spoilers, is repetitive and so boring and just time wasting. It seems it doesn't seem to have any purpose. They don't even understand why they're doing what they're doing.
The work is mysterious and important, Ruth.
Sorry,
to quote one of the members
I'm going to have to go and sit on the naughty step and repeat lines until I agree with that answer.
Yes.
And so, but they don't really understand why they're doing what they're doing, but they keep on doing it because they have to follow the rules. They have to follow the handbook. And I do kind of feel that that's where certainly the church that I was attending, that where things were getting to, where if you said, but why are we having that activity? But why are we asking that of that particular family? That's really tricky for them. And it's, because that's what is prescribed, but it doesn't work for us and it doesn't work for them. And it doesn't fit in. And that's a real hardship rather than a blessing for them. I think that's when perhaps we were causing issues in our ward, certainly, because we were trying to be kind and thoughtful and logical about stuff, and see the bigger picture, as opposed to follow the prescribed instruction book. And I think that's often what leads people away from the church, when they go, but why are we doing this? Why are we following this handbook? That doesn't make any sense for us. That doesn't apply to our circumstances, or where we live in the world, or whatever it is.
Well, so speaking of, I guess, the corporation, the organization in which they exist, I would like to talk about the board, who is a character that doesn't speak, well, has spoken once in the entire show so far. This is what the board looks like. The board is a small speaker that sits on the desk, and it's, I guess, the board of directors of this company that they work for. But it remains silent through most interactions and doesn't speak. It speaks through someone else. It speaks through a woman called Natalie, who will just speak to members of staff and say, the board says this, the board says that. And so many people have drawn an analogy to it as God. And again, God runs Mormonism, but God doesn't speak directly to the members of Mormonism, or very rarely does. You know, we do believe in the church in personal revelation. So God will occasionally speak to you directly, but what God says to you directly obviously isn't going to overturn the words of the leaders, because, you know, Jeffrey R. Holland said it wouldn't. He said it won't contradict. So you're trusting that these leaders, people like Natalie who speak to you, are correctly conveying what God is saying to them from a believing perspective. And from a non-believing perspective, you could ask, is the board even there, or is it just Natalie? And the only clue we get that the board does exist outside of her is when once someone asks, is the board there, this speaker says yes. And that's all it says. All it says. What are your thoughts on the board, Ruth?
Well, at least they got an answer, because I think we'd be thrilled if we thought that Jesus actually did turn to the Q15 meetings. It'd be nice to think he was in charge. No, I think the whole management, leadership, that hierarchy of power, that the people doing the work don't know why they're doing the work, have to answer to leadership. The leadership have to answer to a higher power who is invisible and doesn't actually interact with them. It's, it all jumps out at us as Mormonism, doesn't it?
The board, it's mysterious. It's and like I said, all it has ever said is yes. And so we've got Tim saying,
I was reading it
in the chat, where's Tim? He said, I'm going to go back and watch season 1. Wow, just wow. Yeah, if anyone's been watching this and feels like they want to go back and watch it, I'd recommend go back and watching it.
I was reading his comment where he's put, I had a key to the office and made copies on the copy machine in the church library. He's referring to, he leaked copies of the super secret second bishop handbook.
Yes. Because the handbook, that's a good point though. The handbook used to be secret. The bishop's handbook used to be kept to one side. There was handbook 1, and then there was handbook 2, general handbook for peasants, essentially to use. But now they've collated it all. It's all in one, which I thought was fascinating.
Or do you trust that it's all there? I don't.
Maybe it's not. What do you think might be missing, Ruth?
I don't know. I just feel like they've shown us already by their practice that they would have a 1 and 2, one that's for the, the masses, and one that's kept sacrosanct. Once it became common knowledge that there were these 2, and people like Tim were leaking them, then it's, we'd give it you all. Why would I trust that there's still not some secondary layer of instructions and processes? Look what happened to you. How you did it follow the handbook that you had access to?
No.
I would suggest that maybe there is a second set of rules, one that maybe Curtin McConkie follows, or the SEC follow. Certainly not one that the general membership are aware of when it comes to how they practice and the things that they will do and the things that they won't do.
Maybe it's a book called How to Litigate for Christ. Yeah, and it's a guide on how to sue people just like Jesus would. Maybe that's the rule book of the church.
Yeah.
But I mean, on that point, this big company, Lumen, massive corporation, huge old company, and it seeks to protect itself. So I'll give you an example, and this really sends the point home of just how dangerous it is that they are severed. These individuals. One of them has something thrown at their head while at work. They come out of work with an injury to their head and a note on their car saying, "Oh, you tripped and fell while moving a water cooler and banged your head. Here's a gift card, make it all better." And similarly, the way the church will try and fight to distort the things that happen to people to protect itself. The way that bishops will be that line of defense to say, "Oh, well, he didn't do that," or you should just forgive him. We don't need to report it to the police, or whatever thing it is. They're there so that things that happen within the church don't leak into the outside world. The helpline, the Curtin McConkie helpline, is a great example of this. It's there so that things can be kept in house and dealt with in house, so that people don't go, they're trying to mollify the character who gets injured so that he doesn't go, "Well, I keep getting injured at work and they keep just telling me that I'm clumsy, but I don't think I'm clumsy."
Yeah.
They'd have to be subtle. They'd have to be clever to stop him doing that.
Yeah. Reframing it for you. Mormonism 101.
Yeah.
We'll tell you what to think, and then we'll tell you what to think about what to think as well. Your child's on their mission and having a mental health crisis, it's going to strengthen their testimony. One of my children, none of my children go to church anymore, but he uses that as a quip. Whatever happens, he will say, "It only strengthens my testimony." No matter what it is. That time on his bike, it's just strengthening my testimony, actually.
Before missionaries were able to just talk to their families as often as they were, missionaries were almost like severed individuals in some ways. They could write letters home, but they were encouraged to keep those letters positive and uplifting to their family members and testify of Christ. You weren't to complain to your family. You weren't to write home and say, "Oh, I'm having a terrible time." You lost access to that support structure. And then if your parents called the mission office, the mission president could reframe anything that's happened to you.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they would necessarily, but they could reframe anything.
I remember saying to our eldest when he was on his mission, oh, no, I didn't say it to him, but I remember thinking it of him on his mission, that had he gone to prison, I would have had more contact with him. If he was serving 2 years in prison, I could have spent more time with him and interacted with him more. Possibly better living conditions, possibly better food. Who's to say?
Maybe. Can we talk about the artwork?
Yes.
Let's talk about the artwork. Okay, so
have you got images? Have you got some stills of the artwork?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
So we talked a bit earlier about the artwork.
It's pretty triggering for some people.
Optics and design. This is a piece called "The Youthful Convalescence of Kier." The founder of Lumen, this company they work for. And all right.
Do you think he refused alcohol while having an operation on his leg?
Maybe. Because the story of Kier even echoes Joseph Smith. He was a sort of a poor rural boy who then found his way through industry, through hard work, found things. He found a book in a cave. That's got some parallels as well. But he then starts this company, and this company grows and grows and grows to the point where it's too big to fail. And similarly, and it has all these politicians in its pocket. There's an idea within the first season that a politician has had his wife severed so that one version of her can give birth to a child and carry a child, and then the other version gets to just have the child and not experience pregnancy or childbirth. That idea is kind of floated around, but that person is part of a political group that are advocating for this severance procedure to be available more broadly outside of the company. So again, it shows those interest groups that you can see this with the church. The church has politicians who, in meetings that have been leaked, have talked about essentially how they feel a commitment to the brethren when they make decisions about policy and about representing their constituents, not just their constituents. So you can see that. But in this piece of artwork here, there are parallels to a piece of artwork that's at the South Royalton Visitors Centre, which is the birthplace of Joseph Smith. Striking, isn't it? The similarities.
It is. I was thinking of those paintings, portrait paintings of Joseph and Emma as adults, where the lighting is very similar, where they sort of have that glow to them. So in the painting of Kier as a little boy in bed, he is the light source and glowing. And I know the company's called Lumon.
Lumen,
yeah. So you know, it's that imagery of he is the source of light. And I think Joseph Smith did that with the artworks that he commissioned of himself as well. And certainly the church has done it of artworks that they've commissioned and used since then. And what I found quite interesting, when that daguerreotype came out a couple of years ago that supposedly could be Joseph Smith, I personally think it's a high likelihood it's Joseph Smith. And he looked like a real sort of tough wild west frontier sort of guy. It made him a very real person, a very human person, rather than this mythologized, romanticized painting that almost lends an ancient history to him. Then here's a photograph. Now, with the founder of the company, with Kier, he came from a family that had enough money that he's got servants around him, and he's, you know, lying in this beautiful bed. He's not super poor at that point. He would have had, they could have taken photographs, but he's chosen to create that image as a painting, and then you can stage it and you can finesse it and romanticize it. We know how that all plays out in the church. We know how they use what they use and when they use it. We know how they use photography to make it look like every other person walking into general conference is a person of color or from some far-flung place in the world. We know how when they're zooming around the tabernacle choir, they seem to be able to pick out people. So it's not just stark whiteness everywhere they look. They choose and they curate the imagery that they put out. And that's what this company is doing. It's what all companies do. I think it highlights that the church is a corporation first and foremost, with an image and optics to be concerned about more so than anything else.
I just find it interesting that, you know, I mentioned that the story of Kier is that he was a sort of young boy who his brother Dieter apparently was very wild, and you know, Kier's father's kind of an industrious guy or a factory worker or something. But then at the same time, he said this family's rich enough to have servants around him to look after him, all these people around him. So my point is, there's an inconsistency there in the story of the founder, right?
Yeah.
Equally, there are inconsistencies in the story we're told about Joseph. We're told that Joseph could barely read or write, but then at the same time, we're told the church will make appeals to Joseph Smith's own handwritten letters at times. We're told Joseph Smith had very little formal education, but actually it seems like he did have some education. We're told so many things about his life that they're sort of contradicting. We were never told about him being a treasure digger for years. We were never told about any of that. And now that is sort of coming out. People are trying to work to fit that into their perception of him. But there are conflicting reports around the founder, the mythologized founder of both Lumen, the company from the TV show, and the Mormon Church.
Yeah. And I think you have to say, who is it you're trying to convince? Because in this company, in this fictional company, they're trying to convince the people that work in the company for a purpose. They need their buy-in. They need them to believe in the founder and in the myth of the founder and in the company more than anything else. As to why,
can we sit on that thought for a second, actually? Because, well, no, but as in stay there on that thought, because
and then I was going to say, as the church, why is so much effort? Just ask ourselves, why is so much effort, resource, time, energy spent in regurgitating the myth of the founder of the religion, rather than focusing, if we believe in Christianity, if we believe in, why do we spend so much time focusing on the founder rather than on the Christianity?
Well,
yeah,
no, I think there's something in there about, if it's all about Jesus, then I think with Mormonism, it's about, well, we believe this is the right way to worship Jesus, right? That's what you're having to convince people of. You're not necessarily having to convince people of Christianity, because that's more widely accepted than Mormonism. You're having to convince people of, this is why you should do Christianity our way.
Yeah.
Because of our profit, because of the distinct claims that we make as a church, all that sort of stuff. That seems to be what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a question that often comes up on Reddit is, when you left the church, did you give any of the Christian religions a chance? You know, did you go elsewhere? And most people, I would say 90% of people, will say no. I'm, done with it all. And part of that is because once you've started to unpack one religion and you've got that toolkit, it's very easy then to work your way through and apply those skills. But I also think it's because all of our time as believing members, whether we like to admit that we were doing it or not, was spent poo-pooing other religions and saying we knew the right way of doing it and they're all getting it wrong. So if we spent all of our lives saying how everyone else was getting it wrong, why would deciding that Mormonism is no longer right mean that then makes the others, right? If Mormonism is wrong, doesn't make them right. It's not two sides of the same coin. We don't just flip it over. And that's the thing, because we've spent all of the time with all of the eggs in the basket of Mormonism, and once that's gone, well, that's fine.
Well,
we just live without anything.
You've been painted into a corner with no other options, because you've burnt all those other bridges by poo-pooing all those other religions. So then when that final one that you're stood on goes, you're like, well, I've got nowhere else to go now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you probably had this because I'm a lot older than you, but when I joined the church as a teenager, I remember at that point, there was a lot of members that definitely thought Catholicism was the church of the devil, was it's
because McConkie told them it was.
That's the whore of Babylon. Absolutely. Yeah. And that, my Irish Catholic grandmother would be horrified to think that that's what I was being told at church on a Sunday. But that was being taught in the 80s, still in the 1980s. So I don't know. I think we spend so long just telling everyone, saying why everything else is wrong, that when we do actually go, we don't believe in this anymore, it doesn't mean that we then start believing in other things. We actually say we don't believe in any of those things now.
Yeah. And I think we see some of that actually in the way that one of the people, when they leave the company, we see them trying to get jobs elsewhere, and they just can't.
Yes.
Because once you've been in that place, in that way, you can't do it another way. You can't do another kind of religion, another kind of work.
Skills are not transferable, are they?
Skills are not transferable. I was wanting to grab a point. I think I've managed to hold on to it, about what you said when you talked about why they put so much effort into mythologizing the founder and convincing these people, because these people are locked into work every day. And their outie, you notice they aren't spending all this time convincing their outie of the necessity of the work they do.
Yeah.
Because they just go in and do the work because they get the money. But why would they have to spend time convincing these innies? Because these innies have no control over whether they're there or not. Because if their outie comes to work, then they are just going to wake up at work in the lift, in the elevator. Ding, they'll be there. So why do they spend this much time seeming to try and give them this grand purpose to what they do? And I think it speaks to a need for purpose. It speaks to a need for understanding. These people won't just work for the sake of working because they've got nothing else to do.
Yeah.
And I think we could spend a long time talking about the way control is used in this show, and how, again, a slight spoiler for those that haven't seen it yet, there's not that many people down there keeping an eye on these employees. There's not that many people. It's a very light touch, in some ways, control system.
So I've just had a light bulb.
The illusion of choice. Go on, Ruth.
Well, no, just from what you said, the outie is doing it for the wage. They're actually getting paid to do the job, even though then, you know, that's their reason to have the procedure and for their innie to go in and do the work. The innie never sees the benefit of the wage, do they?
No.
It's all about the service. And isn't that church, where we're just doing it to serve? And it really grinds my gears when people talk about, you know, I serve in this calling, I served as a missionary, I served this and I served that. It was self-serving. At the best, it was self-serving because you were doing it for you know, your eternal salvation and your own blessings or whatever. Service to me now means helping community, helping people altruistically, not because it's part of the in group innies, but because you want to make a change to the world around you, or you see a need that you can help. And I think that, so those innies need a purpose. The innie me at church needed a reason for all of the things that I was doing as free labor, or as you know, that seemed to go against my own best interest or better judgment, or you know, against my cognitive, you know, my cognitive dissonance would kick in, but my innie needed a reason to keep on doing it. And I think you're right. I think those myths that we tell ourselves as members of the church are there for that purpose.
And again, so with this idea that we are told that we chose this in a pre-existence, because of that veil, because we've been split off, well, actually, we didn't. That individual did, if they existed. Depends what you believe. If they existed, they chose that. I didn't. Similarly, the outie chose to send me to work. The outie chose to create this version of me. They chose to create the innie. They chose to separate themselves off, to wall off those parts in their mind. And in doing so, they've created a sovereign entity, a person, an existent person that has no choice but to be there. So you've got to give that person a reason to get on with. Otherwise, they're going to try and kill themselves to get out, as we see from one of the individuals that works there. They just want it to end. And, you know, they have this, I think Dylan has a line where he says, endless toil. Because you feel like you've slept. You must feel like you've slept. You'll feel the effects physiologically of whatever your outie's been up to. But then you just wake up again and it starts over. And it's that hamster wheel. It's that treadmill. And that breaks people down over time. And I've been thinking about people I know who have had callings for 10, 15 years, long callings. And then the moment they're released, everyone's eager to get them onto another one because you've got to keep them on the treadmill. You've got to keep people doing the things. You got to keep feeding people the diet of purpose. Otherwise, they'll just stop and they won't want to come back. And in the case of Mormonism, they'll actually have some control over where they come back. And that's why COVID, I think, was so damaging to the church, because a lot of people the treadmill stopped. Yeah.
And hugely healing to a lot of people. I think what you just said there about the innies being, you know, they literally all of their day, every day is being at work, and they feel rested, but it's a never-ending work day for them. And they become very dependent on each other as a small group. There's a small group, a team of 4 people that work closely together, and they become very dependent on each other, and you know, their work cells have this bond with each other. And we see that in church relationships. We know that they're not real, but at the same time, we're hugely dependent on them. And that status quo is massive. And when somebody is removed from that group, either through their own actions or something happens, we see it in the show, but we know how that feels at church. If somebody's no longer there for any reason, it's really horrible for the group that is still there. And they don't know what's happened to them, and they're not allowed to grieve what's happened to them. They're not allowed to grieve. And gosh, we see that at Mormon funerals. You're not allowed to grieve. You've got to be happy that they've gone on to the next place. But if somebody's gone, they've
apostatized, they've left the church,
then you're not allowed to grieve for them. You're better off without them. And also, you're not allowed to be curious about why they've gone, or what's happened, or
happened to them.
Are they okay? You're not allowed to do those things. And we see that. And So I understand that both that relationship of solidarity within the church and within this organisation, this fictional organisation, but I also understand the relationships you miss out on. So at one point, again, sorry for spoilers, it's season 1 spoilers, but one of the chaps is woken up and he realizes he's got kids, and he realizes he wants to know his kids. He wants to have a relationship with them, but because they're in the outie world, he can't know them, and it breaks his heart. Isn't that what we do all the time? You know, I was a convert to the church. I have a fantastic family that were never Mormon, and I missed out on depth of relationship with cousins and aunts and uncles and things because my focus and my time was thrown into the church and those relationships. And as much as they, you know, I love them and they love me, I could have had so much better relationships with them and time with them, and throw my energy into that, and then, you know, blow that up to the people, particularly those members of the church who live in high density Mormon places. When they step away, they lose so much. Not just friendships, but family relationships, sometimes work relationships, because of how integrated everything is. That's just a huge price to pay.
Well, I think in my own family, I think about how my relationships have improved, or how they did improve for the most part. I mean, one of my siblings just decided they weren't going to talk to me anymore, but for the most part, with my siblings who had already stepped away from the church, my relationships improved when I became more heterodoxical, when I stopped being really orthodox and judgmental and thought I was better than them.
Is that a dinosaur or a heterodoxical?
Heterodoxical.
Okay.
I believe is the word. I want to point out Rock, whoever Rock is. Welcome to the stream. Everyone, welcome Rock in the chat. He says innies are infantilized. Thoughts on that, Ruth? The infantilization, the rewards that they get for their hard work, finger traps and balloons and waffle parties. I mean, the waffle party is anything but an infant reward. Actually, it's oddly. Well, yeah, we won't go there, but you know, a lot of things, you know, the music dance experience and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, games night as YSA, and you know, so infantilized at church, so infantilized, and it's that really weird balance where we hypersexualize children, we're getting them to focus on modesty and the male gaze and all of those sorts of things from a ridiculously early age, but then we hugely infantilize adults, and we reward them with cookies, you know, cookie drops on people's doorsteps, instead of actually, let's have an adult relationship, let's have a proper discussion about something that's bothering you, we'll drop you cookies. It's the same sort of thing. It really is.
Yeah. We're going to wrap up soon. I want to talk about the temple and how it relates to the severed floor of Loomis. So they work on this floor where they go through an elevator, and that's what triggers the thing in their brain that separates their memories. And not only does the seventh floor kind of look like the temple in many ways, you know, I think I've been thinking about the interior design of the temple in preparation for this episode, and I've been thinking about, never has a building had so many sort of light sources that haven't been used to create a cozy environment, but instead create stark, white, almost unsettling light throughout. The lighting in the temple is odd. It's like every light is the main light of your living room, and it's just a bit too bright, you know. So I think that's a bit of a problem for the temple, and a bit of a similarity between these places.
So Judica in the comments is saying the waffle party gave me heavy endowment vibes.
All right, let's talk about it. So the waffle party, if you get to the end of your quarter, having done a very, very good job of your refiner of the quarter, you get to stay after work for something called a waffle party, which they take you through to the perpetuity wing, which is this museum to the founder. They take you to the replica of the founder's house, and then you're given a plate of waffles to eat, and then it looks as though the individuals with goats' heads on will perform sexual favors on you. I think, is that fair to say? I'm trying to keep this episode monetized, but I wonder why it's giving heavy endowment vibes. Is it because it's kind of this next step of a ceremony that all of a sudden gets really weird? Like most of it's pretty normal, and then
ceremonies and
yeah, most of Mormonism is pretty normal, pretty generically Christian, and then you go through the endowment, and all of a sudden a shift does happen. I think many believing people would say, yeah, the endowment felt like a shift. It felt like a different. I don't know how many people would say, oh no, it felt perfectly natural as a next step. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you thought it was just, yeah, if you thought it was just a natural next step or not. But the idea that, you go to the temple and you're meant to leave the outside world behind. And when you leave the temple, you're not meant to take any of the information from there out. Similarly, with the severed floor, they have sensors. You can't write notes. You can't try and get yourself out of there, passing notes or information out. And similarly, they don't let you bring anything in. There's a locker room where you change things, change clothes, etc. You have to scan your recommend to get in, all that sort of stuff.
Oh yes, I hadn't even thought about it.
Get your ID cards and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. What are your thoughts? Can you see any parallels with the temple?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is that thing of it's a reward for behavior. It's there's a sort of feeling of you will accept however weird it gets because you've been rewarded by this thing. So you're gonna do, the goats thing is bizarre, isn't it? But kind of just go, okay, I must be able to accept this because my management think this is a reward for me for doing my day job, so raising the game. I think what you were saying about we seem fairly mainstream Christian at church until you then go to the temple and see all the Masonic elements to it, and it feels really quite weird. But by the time you're that far in, you just accept it. I think that's the same with this show, whereby they are so far in, they've worked their way through the reward, they've got the little finger traps, they've done the different things, they've had the dance, and then suddenly they get rewarded by the next level thing, which is the waffle party, and it all gets a little bit weird and culty and
and just a bit odd.
Yeah.
But what can they do? They're there, and that's all the experience they know, And I think that, again, there's a further parallel there in that this is all people know. And for many people, Mormonism's all they know. If you're born into the church, it's all you know.
It's all you know. And you look around at your family and your friends and your loved ones, and they're going to the temple once a month or however often they go. So when you go through for the first time, you think, well, it must be all right because they go regularly and they're not freaked out by it. So even though I'm finding this really strange, you kind of talk yourself into it. And I suppose that's the same with this show. They finding certain things really strange and weird, but they're looking around at people that they trust and respect and thinking, well, they seem to be okay with this, so maybe I need to be okay with it. Maybe it's me that needs to change.
Yeah, that's a fair point. All right, final slide. The corporation. And let's just talk about how this corporation, Lumen, that they work for, is incredibly like the church, because the church is a corporation in lots of ways. It just is. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say anymore.
It absolutely is. It's the corporation of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It literally is a corporation. There's no other way around it.
Sel hit the nail on the head here about the temple. Outies can't speak about what happened in the temple. Exactly. But yeah, this corporation just oversees everything, and they have the resources to do whatever they need to do to keep. So again, without spoiling it too much, at some point someone tries to blow the whistle on it, right? A few of them tried to blow the whistle on what's going on inside. They suppress it easily, with ease. They suppress any sort of pushback they get. And we've already talked about how they have, at one point you see a corporate event for this corporation. You can see all the politicians coming around and shaking hands, and it's so Mormon in that respect.
And I think again, so Mormon, because you realise that the outies are being, when the innies are at work, they are being monitored constantly.
Yeah.
And we expect that. They're in that institution and they're being monitored, fine. When the outies are at home, you suddenly realise how much they're being monitored too. And you realise that actually management, who are aware of both sides and don't have their brain switched and severed, they have this dual role where they're both monitoring on the outside and monitoring on the inside, and almost have an alter ego in both parts. And you realise, I mean, I was so naive, I was so innocent. I'd never heard of the SEC until leaving the church. Never even crossed my mind that the church would operate in that sort of way. And I, the amount of money and resources that the church spends litigating and trying to cover things up, it blows my mind. But it goes back to, it is a corporation. Don't forget, it's a corporation. Don't forget why they're doing what they're doing. What is the purpose of all of this? It's all about the ethics. It's all about protecting the brand. It's all about the corporation.
Yeah, agreed. And with that, I think we've done enough talking about Severance. But thank you very much, Ruth. If you did like this video, make sure to give it a like. If I was a proper YouTuber right now, I would say that there's a link in the description where you can get 3 months free Apple TV, so you can go and check this out, or you can get 10% off your first month or whatever. Apple have offered me no such deal to pass along to yourselves. So if you do have access to it, make sure to go and watch the show. That would be great, I think. And
it's one of the best things that have come out in recent years.
It's a very good show.
It really is. It's very, very well made, and it will be triggering, I think, for some people, but it is fantastically well made, and there's massive amounts of story still to come. And yeah, so highly recommend. Something to take your mind off anything else that might be happening in the world right now.
Yeah. I believe, and thanks for that, Ruth, I think you may be able to get a free trial of Apple TV. That may be the sort of thing they do. Do check it out if you'd like to watch it. Let me know in the comments of this video if you have gone away and watched it, and then come back. Let me know what you think. But thanks for sitting through. It was quite a novel and sort of different episode for me to do. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm willing to see any feedback in the comments. But yeah, like this video, subscribe if you want to see more videos. I will also be doing some hard-hitting response videos or hard-hitting analytical videos in the coming weeks. So be sure to stick around for those. But in the meantime, have a great one. Enjoy watching the Baltimore Beavers and the Seattle Shrews take each other on, and watching all those lovely adverts that happened in the halftime part of the thing. Enjoy the Super Bowl and all that. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you next week. If I can end the stream. Bye.